Today we're going to take a look at the boastful brawler Gaston. Gaston is a large offensive powerhouse that wants to be in the thick of the action. When he's on the field, you always have to watch out for where he is and who he's planning on attacking next. No one hits like Gaston, causes fits like Gaston. No one piles up KOs, I'll admit, like Gaston. I know reading's hard for my guy Gaston, but let's get straight to it by reading his character card next. Like most characters, Gaston can move 2 spaces and hit for 2 damage. However, his hand size is 1, which is less than average, so in exchange for Gaston's strength, you sacrifice the size of your hand. Gaston's health points stand at a hearty 10, while his victory points are a sizable 6. This makes Gaston a target for your opponent, but at the same time, he has the health to stay in the midst of the fight. For Gaston's skill, you know he loves to boast. You reveal the top card in your deck, and if that card's in action, Gaston gains 1 strong, which boosts his damage by 1. Otherwise, Gaston takes 1 damage. It's a good skill depending on how many action cards you have in your deck. Most of the other characters have a decent amount outside of Dr. Facilier, but some have more than others. 1 out of 10 damage isn't much as long as Gaston isn't low on health. Either way, this leans into Gaston's strength, literally. And when things go well, he can KO certain characters in 1 turn by himself, which is extremely uncommon, but incredibly useful. Once he upgrades himself, Gaston tries to overwhelm his rivals through KOs. Once he nabs a knockout, Gaston gains 3 health, moves 2 spaces, and gains an additional VP. This sounds slight until you realize that it turns him into a wrecking ball that builds momentum once he gets going. It's especially dangerous if you manage to get your opponent low on health. So, let's go through Gaston's cards and break it down a little further. I'll be going from most common to least common as some cards appear in the deck multiple times. Brawler is Gaston's most common card, appearing 3 times. It does 4 damage to an adjacent rival, but if that rival isn't next to any of its teammates, the opposing summoner also has to banish a card from their hand. So, not only does Brawler do a good amount of damage, but it encourages Gaston to bully characters that don't have backup. Forcing your opponent to banish cards is an ability that can quickly disrupt your opponent's strategy. If you leave them without their cards, it's that much harder to counter Gaston's offense. Next is Shove, which appears twice. Shove allows you to do 3 damage to an adjacent rival and move them 2 spaces. It's worth noting that you can't move that rival through other characters. This card can help keep rivals away from VP spaces, or keep certain characters out of range of each other. Shrug It Off, not to be confused with Shake It Off, is a movement card that eliminates all status conditions on Gaston, then allows him to move 3 spaces. This card may not seem valuable at first, until you realize that without it, Gaston is incredibly weak to status effects, such as Immobilize or Shrunken. There are 2 of them, so try to save these if you know your opponent uses status effects. While we're at movement cards, we'll shift to Let's Dance. It shifts an adjacent character, whether an ally or a rival, 1 space, then allows Gaston to move up to 2 spaces. There's only 1 of them, so I recommend using this to either move your ally early on to position him onto a VP space, or use it to waltz your opponent right off a VP space. It's also helpful to isolate your opponent for a follow-up attack. Fury hits each adjacent rival for 1 damage, and allows you to have an additional movement or action phase. Aside from allowing Gaston to go full Hulk, this can be a momentum shifting card when Gaston has strong, or when he has another strong action card available for follow-up, like our last card. Sheer Bravado is one of the most damaging cards in the game. It does 4 damage to a rival, but if neither of them are next to anyone else, then Gaston completely bullies them for 6 damage. If you combine that with Strong, it's enough to KO Facilier or Maleficent from full health. Use this card to KO someone even when they least expect it. So, what do we make of Gaston then? I'd say he's a fairly straightforward but powerful character that can bully rivals when they're alone, he moves people around easily, and he hits extremely hard. Now, you might look at him and scoff because he's not as complicated as some of the others. Don't underestimate him though. While he's simple enough that newcomers can grasp his gameplay easily, with enough patience, his cards can combo and dominate a match. No one should feel completely safe near him, as he has the potential to do up to 9 damage in a turn without any help from his teammates, thanks to his boasting, fury, and his sheer bravado. So, Gaston's strengths are in his high damage output. When we talk about one-on-one damage, his is the most consistently high. His high health helps him stay close and personal in the fight. And his direct control and influence over other characters' positions. His weaknesses, however, are his high VP count, because he will be a target since he's worth 6 VP and wants to be up in the action. Even though his damage is always high, his best damage is dependent on the opponent staying divided. And although most characters can give you 2 cards in your hand, Gaston only allows you to have 1. While it may appear as if Gaston operates best on his own, there are some things that his teammates can do to help him out. First of all, Gaston's boast encourages you to gather allies with more attack icons on their cards. Some of the characters with the most of those include Demona, Mickey, and Aladdin. The character that has the least, though, is Dr. Facilier. Gaston isn't the type of character that needs to be on a specific team, but some teammates help him do his job better than others. Aside from that, Gaston wants allies that can clear a path for him to fight. Aladdin takes cards away from his opponent that could otherwise hinder Gaston. Demona and Maleficent can attack groups of rivals, encouraging them to split up for Gaston. Ariel can heal damage that we know Gaston will be taking while he's in the thick of it. So, when I combine those abilities with matching the right upgrade paths, my team recommendations include Gaston, Maleficent, and Demona. Demona and Maleficent can do AoE or widespread damage to the opponent, which allows Gaston to clean up any stragglers. Admittedly, the other members of this team are frailer, but the combined offensive output is potentially unmatched. Gaston, Ariel, and Aladdin. Aladdin keeps your opponent's hand size low and remains stealthy, while Ariel keeps your hand full while healing Gaston, who will likely take the most damage. Your opponent will have to use cards to outpace Gaston's damage and Ariel's healing. At that point, they'll be in danger of running out of cards. So, that's our breakdown of Gaston. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to stick around for our next breakdown. But until then, how can you read this? There's no pictures. See you next time.